Good morning, church. How we doing? Good. It is good to be back with you after having a couple friends preach in the last couple weeks. Excited to open up God's Word with you this morning, and we're going again. Awesome. Somebody's like, we don't want to hear you preach. We just want to see the video again. That's what's happening. Hey, 9 a.m., quick word for you. I don't know if you know this, but we also have a 10:45 service. Did you know that? Yeah, so here's the deal. I'm noticing 9 a.m.'s getting pretty full again and consistently. There's a little bit more space at 10:45. Here's what I don't want to happen is for friends to come at 9 a.m. and say, it doesn't look like they got space for me. And so I want to ask in selfless unity that if you have a flexible schedule on Sundays and you're like, hey, 10:45 works just as well for me and my family, then consider joining us at 10:45, helping us make a little bit more space for those who would be coming to join us, friends and neighbors at 9 a.m., that they would have space, because our building up to reach out, space constraints, that will be alleviated at some point, but that's a little ways off. And so I want to plant that with you, 9 a.m. If you're like, nope, 9 a.m.'s my time, I got nap time after this, then I am jealous and I respect that, all right? Here's the deal. My kids, they love to play this game on Alexa where it starts playing a song, and then it plays a couple, lyrics, and then you get to complete the lyrics or kind of guess who the song is, who the artist is. I want to try that with you, and I am supremely confident in your intelligence. Should I be? You guys do not sound confident. You guys are like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. So here, I'm going to give you a lyric, and I think you can pick out the rest of the line, okay? Familiar song. It says, what the world needs now is sweet love, right? Love, sweet love. This was like a banner song, an anthem of the 60s, that what the world needs now is love, sweet love. And it's one of those that's kind of been played and played, but it's not just unique to that one song way back then. We have countless songs and poems and portrayals that suggest that what the world needs most right now is that we love one another, right? And we look around our world and we can't really deny that need, can we? See, as we come into the scriptures today, we're back in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 12. If you've got a Bible, you can flip there with me. What we're going to find is Jesus is going to echo this sentiment that what the world needs now, more than anything, what each of us need more than anything is love. But what he defines as love is going to be infinitely deeper and richer than the love that we're often peddled today. So if you got a Bible, Mark chapter 12, verse 28. And while you're finding your place, let me set the stage for you. It's still Tuesday in Jesus's Passion Week. 2 days before, he strode in to Jerusalem on the back of a donkey to a triumphal entry. Everything's looking up, right? You get a couple more days ahead, and just 3 days from this moment, he's going to be crucified on a cross. And so we're still on Tuesday. Jesus is in the temple courts. He's surrounded by all these religious teachers and leaders, and he's constantly they're trying to trap him. They're trying to catch him in what he says, and we've seen multiple occurrences of this in the last number of weeks. We saw these uber-religious Pharisees and the accommodating political class try to trap him with a question about taxes. Remember that a couple weeks ago? In a scene that we are missing here, the upper class Sadducees, they try to ensnare him in a question about marriage. And then in the scene we come to right here, we see a scribe, a religious teacher, a lawyer who knows the law really well, who comes and asks him a question. There's this series of questions, and we're going to find this is where the series of questions ends. And this scribe, this teacher of law, he comes and he asks a question, but something's different about him. He actually asks authentically. He's not trying to trap Jesus. He's honestly asking. Let's watch this unfold. Mark 12, verse 28. Here we go. One of the teachers of the law, your version might say scribes, he came and heard them debating, and noticing that Jesus had given a good answer to the previous questions, he said, "Teacher, of all the commandments, which is the most important?" The most important one, Jesus answered, is this: "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength." He said the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. And there is no greater commandment than these. And this scribe looks at Jesus. kind of pronouncing judgment on Jesus' answer, which you'll find out in a minute is kind of a mistake. And he says, well said, teacher. You can see he's authentic. He says, you're right in saying that God is one and there is no other God but him. Well, we just confessed in that creed, right? And to love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, with all your strength, to love him, your neighbor as yourself, is more important than all the burnt offerings and sacrifices and temple worship that we could ever do. And when Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. And from then on, no one dared ask him any more questions. What a cool scene, right? And here's why I'm excited about this passage. Here's why I kind of stored it up for me. I was like, nobody else gets this one. I get this one, right? Yeah, that's what you get to do when you're putting the preaching calendar together, right? Because this is the core of who we are as Christians. This is what we believe. If you're here and you're exploring faith today, this is ultimately like Jesus answering right here, what is the most important thing? And he makes it really clear. He says, love God and love others. This kind of question, this debate was common in Jesus' day because in the Torah, Genesis through Deuteronomy, the first 5 books of the Bible, there are 613 laws, 613 commandments. And in those laws, they would ask, what's most important? Because all 613, they can't really be equal, right? And on top of this, you have the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is the oral traditions of the rabbis, of the teachers, another 1,500 laws. Can anybody keep track of 2,100 to-dos? Is anybody in here thinking, that sounds like my honey-do list at home, right? Some of you are. If so, don't raise your hand. They're probably sitting next to you, okay? But some of us were like, 2,100, that's a lot, right? We don't have honey-dos in my house. My wife has honey-don'ts because she's like, dude, just stop doing stuff. Just sit and be with us, right? But some of us were like, 2,100, who can keep track of that, right? But 613 even, who can keep track of that? And so they would ask, what's most important? What's primary? And the Talmud, Jewish document, tells us the story of a man who came to Rabbis Hillel and Shammai. These were the 2 foremost rabbis around Jesus' day. And he asked him a question. He said, can you sum up, Shammai, Hillel, can you sum up for me all the law while I'm standing on one foot? Can you do it? And Rabbi Shammai thought he was joking, so he chased him away with a stick because that's how you treat him, right? Chases him away with a stick. Hillel, though, Rabbi Hillel said, here's how you sum it. His summation is, what is hateful for you, do not do to others. This is the whole Torah, and everything else is just interpretation. And so now here's this scribe, this teacher, lawyer guy who comes to Jesus, asks the same question, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus replies, in essence, love God and love others. Says it's that simple. Not easy, but it's that simple. Love God, love others. He's quoting 2 Hebrew Bible passages. He's quoting the Shema in Deuteronomy 6, and he's also quoting from Leviticus 19. See, every good Jewish boy and girl would learn the Shema when they were very young. It was the first prayer they would learn. And they would pray it every morning, every evening. It was the core of what they believed. I visited a Jewish friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and walking in his house, he still has that Shema. It's written in a little box in the doorway. Maybe you've seen these. And this would be common. They would even wear it on their clothes. Deuteronomy 6, verse 4 and following, it gets its name from the first word, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. V'adhavta et Adonai Elohecha b'kol levavka. This is the Shema. It's the hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. This is the core of what they believed. And so they would recite this day in and day out. It was so fundamental to knowing God and having salvation in him. And so it's really no surprise that Jesus starts right here by pulling out this verse. Everybody kind of expected that, right? But Jesus, he goes on and he quotes another. He goes to Leviticus 19:18 and pairs these. He says, love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus is ever the overachiever, isn't he? You know, he's asked for one. He's like, I'll give you 2. I'll see your one. I'll raise you. Love your neighbor, right? And so the summation of the law that Jesus gives here, it's not entirely new to Jesus. But the way that he puts it, is so profound. It's so unique in how he lays it out. See, we said earlier, nobody can keep track of 613 laws, right? I can't. I can barely keep track of half of that, or like a few. You boil those 613 down to 10, and you get the 10 commandments, which really are like the core of those 613. If you're with me, say, uh-huh. And you can boil it down to 10. 10, I at least have that many fingers, right? And so I could count them off, right? Even that is hard to keep track. But Jesus goes beyond that 10, and he boils it down to 2. And he says, love God and love others. And what's fascinating is when you look at the 10 commandments, you realize they can pretty easily be boiled down into those 2. The first 4 are really all about loving God. Have you ever seen that? Have no other gods before me. Make no idols. Don't dishonor God's name. Remember the Sabbath. All about honoring, loving God. And the next 6, 5 through 10, next 6 commands are all about loving others. Honor your parents. Some of these teens are like, dang it, he said that one again. Honor your parents. Don't murder. Don't commit adultery. Steal, lie, cheat. Covet others. These are about loving others. So love God, love others. Jesus seems to know what he's talking about here, huh? Sums it up pretty well. But what does that look like in our lives for us to really love God and love others? Jesus says we're to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, with all our strength. And it caught me this week just how incredible this is. And maybe you're like me, and you've been in the church for a little while. You've read this passage for a little while, and it's kind of gotten stale for you. You're like, yeah, I've heard that one before. Love God, love others. It sounds really nice. I get it. But do you realize what you're invited to here? Do you realize what you're commanded and invited to here? I mean, see, this is life-altering. It's revolutionary. It's magnificent when you actually understand what you're being invited to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. See, if your friend came to you and they said, hey, do you believe in God? Do you believe in God? You might answer, yeah, I believe in God. I believe there's a supreme deity out there. I even know a couple things about him. I've read the Bible. I believe in God. And that's good. Or your friend might come and ask you, are you a religious person? And you're like, well, yeah, I practice the Christian faith. I go to church. I read the Bible sometimes. I talk to God. Like I guess I'm a religious person. But if your friend came and asked, do you love God? How would you answer that? See, loving God is different than just believing or practicing a religion. Love is something you give to somebody you're in a relationship with. Now, I could tell you I love tacos and donuts and a lot of things, and you'd say, no, you can't really love those. The most you can do is really enjoy them, and I do. But that's not love, right? Love can only be experienced in a relationship. And that's what you're invited to with God. Not just to believe some doctrines. We went over this creed. That's good. That's important. We need to have a solid grasp on what we believe. But it's not just belief. It's not just going through religious motions and hoops and practices. Do you love God? It's an invitation to a relationship. See, I can tell you I love tacos and I love donuts, but I don't. I love my wife. I love my kids because I'm in a relationship with them. And there is nothing that would ever change that love for them. See, our God is not an unnamed, impersonal, abstract concept. And I worry that for some of us, even some of us who have been in the church for a long time, that's how we think of God. This impersonal, abstract concept that's out there. We're like, yeah, I believe in that. And that's good. Or I practice my religious things that I think I'm supposed to do. But do you know the heart of God? Do you love God? Are you in a relationship with God? This God is not an unnamed impersonal higher force or abstract concept. He's a personal God with whom you can enter a relationship. He has a name. He has a story. He has a deep, deep love for every single person he has ever created. Do you know that today? And he wants us to not just believe, not just practice certain things, but to love him back. To return that love that he's so given us, to love him with our heart, our soul, our mind, our strength. The word heart here is the Hebrew word lev. The Hebrew word lev means it's a metaphorical seat of our emotions. It's essentially the core of your being. It's your inner self. And it's so common. We say it all the time, right? We say today, I love you with all my heart, right? And we say that comes from Scripture. Did you realize that? I love you with the core of who I am. I love you with all of that. And that's what we're invited to with God. To love him from the central part of our being. And when we love God, we're called to love him with our whole heart. Not just to add him to our already pretty good life. My life's pretty good, but let's add Jesus in because then I at least have eternity secured. He says, no, love me with all your heart. And this doesn't mean that our love for God rises and falls with our emotions. That's often what we think of with the heart, right? It doesn't rise and fall with our emotions, but it's not disconnected from our emotions either. Some of us, we don't let emotions in our relationship with God. It's okay. You're an emotional being. You can let them in. But when we love God with our whole heart, we're experiencing our highest good, our deepest joy in him. Do you love God like this? The soul in the Shema is the Hebrew word nephesh. It means our appetites, our desires, our longings, what drives us on the inside, what we really want. The soul, just like your heart, is kind of a way of summing up your whole being, like the core of who you are. And this is a desire here to know God more. It's a transformation from the inside out. It's a longing to experience God's love. This psalmist, when he pens, my soul longs for you, even faints. Like, does your soul love God like this? And I'll be the first one here to say it often doesn't. Like, there are a lot of days I don't love God with my soul like that. And there are a lot of days where I have to honestly say, God, I don't really want what you want. But I need you to help me to want what you want. Anybody else here? Good, I'm not the only one. See, I don't love God with all my soul a lot of days, a lot of moments every day. But this is the call for us, is to love God with our whole soul, to love him with all we are. Is God growing a love for him in your soul today? With all your strength, he says. Strength is the Hebrew word me'od, and me'od means to love God with all our might, with all our strength, with all our power, with all our resources. This isn't just how much you can lift at the gym, okay? It's not just physically how strong you are. This is all your resources, all you have at your disposal. Every power or resource you have at your disposal to impact and affect change, that is your me'od, your strength, your might. When I was studying Hebrew, a professor of mine helped me understand. He said it's loving God with all your oomph. Like, you can't even put a word to it. Like, love God with all your everything. And so, in essence, he's saying, love God with all you are and with all you have. And is this the kind of love that you have for the Lord? Do you love him? Not just with all you are, but with all that you have at your disposal to give back to him, your money, your resources, your time, your energies. That you give everything you have back to the Lord to say, God, I want you to do what you want to do with this. This is what Jesus' hearers would recite every morning. As they recite the Shema, and they'd say, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And now Jesus comes and he adds to it. Because he's Jesus, he can do that, right? And so Jesus comes and he adds to it, and he says to love the Lord our God, not just with all our heart and our soul and our strength, but with all our mind. Did you catch that? Your mind is the Greek word dianoia, and it means understanding or intellect. And many would say that the mind was implicit there in strength. It was there, but what was implicit, now Jesus makes explicit. He spells it out. He says, we got to love the Lord our God with all our mind. That means to use your thinker, right? That means to use what's between your ears here. That means to think critically, to grow in the grace and knowledge and truth of God. It means to be rooted in what you believe and why you believe it. I was with my daughter earlier this week, took a little road trip, and we listened to some things along the way just to stimulate and to spur on and to challenge our thinking as Christ followers. And I told her, I said, I'm just so proud of you for loving the Lord your God with all your mind. My friends, do you love God with all your mind? Do you stimulate your thoughts with things that help you know Jesus more and worship him more fully? Or do you fill it with whatever is on the radio or Spotify or whatever is on the TV or whatever? Like, do you stimulate your mind to think critically and love the Lord with all you have in it? If a friend asked you to share the gospel with them, could you do it? Could you spell out the gospel clearly? If doubts come to mind, if questions about your faith come to mind, do you run from them or do you lean into them? Do you study up so you can address them? If somebody came and they asked you to defend your faith, tell me why you believe what you believe, could you give a cogent understanding and articulation of what you believe and why you believe it? Could you? And if you're like, honestly, I don't really know if I could, maybe that's an opportunity to love God more with all your mind. You see, our world is getting increasingly hostile to Christianity. And honestly, for me, I'm okay with that. You know why? Because it's in those hostile environments that the grace of God shines more brightly and where the church flourishes, okay? But in this, you need to, and you will already have been, or you will be challenged to either drop or redefine what you believe as a Christian as it comes in conflict with what our cultural norms are. Are you in a position, are you able to defend what you believe? Are you loving God with all your mind? See, many of us simply aren't prepared to answer what we believe because we aren't loving the Lord with all our minds. Some of us have checked our brains at the door and we're content with kind of a mindless leap of faith. We're like, it's a leap of faith. And so I don't know, I just believe, I guess. That's not what you're called to. This is an intellectual faith right here. I know it's good to be open-minded, but some of us are so open-minded, our brains fell out a long time ago, right? And it's like, that's not what we're called to. We're called to think critically about our faith. So just, my friends, marinate in this verse for a moment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind. And Jesus says that this is our highest calling. This is the most important thing that anyone can do in their entire lifetime. Whatever goals you've had, whatever aspirations you've had, this is the highest goal and aspiration you can have. Why? Because it's for your highest good. It's for your deepest joy that you would know God. And so this is a command. And some of us, we hear this and we're like, well, hold on. You can't command love, right? If I told you that when I proposed to Krista, I'm like, you must love me, right? You'd be like, I got concerns about that marriage, right? Because you can't command love. And so we hear this and we're like, is God like super selfish? I mean, what's going on there? You need to understand this is not a selfish command to be loved. It's not like God has a daddy complex and he's trying to fill it by other people. No, God understands what is for your best. What is for your highest good, your deepest joy. And he wants that for you. So he says, listen, if you want to experience that, anybody want to experience your highest good, deepest joy? Anybody? 4 of us. Awesome. And so if you want that, he says, let me tell you how you experience it. Love me with all you are. Love me. And like any other worthwhile human love, we love God not for all the benefits he brings, not for all the stuff he gives. We love God because he's lovely. We love God because of who he is, because he's trustworthy, because he's the only one worthy. And so our goal is to give back an undiluted, unmixed, unqualified love, a love that's simply reflecting back the love that he first gave us. Are you following? And when we love God like this, we're going to seek to follow his instructions in his word. Jesus, we don't have time to go into it, but in John 14:23, Jesus says, listen, anyone who loves me will what? Obey my teaching. And we're like, dang it, that doesn't sound like fun. No, it's for your highest good and your deepest joy. And that's what loving God back looks like, as you follow what he says in his word. So you got to study his word. You got to know his word. And we do this not out of duty, but because that's for our good. Not only that, but Jesus elsewhere, and Jesus' good friend John, same writer, he sums it up and he says, listen, if we love one another, God lives in us and his love is made complete in us. So what's another proof of our love for God? Well, it's loving others, right? He's just echoing what Jesus says here, right? Back to our scripture, Mark 12, verse 31. Jesus says the second is like it. Remember, he's asked, what's the top? And Jesus is like, I'll do one better for you. Here's top two, okay? Love God, love others. And he quotes Leviticus 19, says, love your neighbor as yourself. And at first, this doesn't sound all that profound. Like everybody knows the golden rule, right? Everybody knows the golden rule. In fact, most major world religions and worldviews have a form of the golden rule. In Buddhism, they say, hurt not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. Confucius said, do not do to others what you do not want them to do to you. Sound familiar? Right? In Hindu scriptures, we read, do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you. Islam is along the same lines. None of you truly believes until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself. Believe it or not, even Satanists have a form of the golden rule. You're like, no, they don't. Yes, they do. Do unto others as they have done to you. Now, they use it differently, and it's to justify retribution, but it's the golden rule, is it not? And so you look at this and you say, well, so Jesus isn't all that revolutionary, not all that original, I guess. But when you look a little deeper, you start to recognize that what Jesus is saying is so unique. See, his is not phrased negatively. Did you notice all of those are do not do, do not do, do not do. But instead, Jesus phrases it positively. And he doesn't stop there with like, be kind, be nice, accept him. He goes beyond that. And he says, don't just stop short of doing them harm. But he asks for more. He says, don't just treat them well, love them. That's not about your actions. And ultimately, it's about your character, the way that you look at them. Love them. If you truly love God, you got to love your neighbor as well. And so you start to see that this love God, love others thing, these aren't two separate things, right? They're interconnected. In fact, you can't separate them because if you love God, you will naturally what? Love others. Not a trick question. You will naturally what? Okay, you're getting more confident. 1045 is going to totally dominate you on that one, okay? If you love God, you will love others. It affects every part of your life, every relationship we're in. It spills out onto others as we share God's love with them and we mediate, we dispense God's love to others. This week, my gas gauge came on in my car. Told me I had only so many miles left before it was empty. Anybody else like to play a little game at that point? Right? And you're like, let's see how far we can push this, right? Any other 0 mile club folks? Yeah, my people. There we go. Yeah, and so sometimes that comes on. I'm like, let's see how far we can go, right? And so, but that gauge is so helpful. My gas gauge or electric charge gauge is so helpful. Why? Because you can't look in your golf cart, you Murrietans, at how much is left in your golf cart battery, right? You can't look in your gas tank so easily to see what's in that battery. So the gauge is so helpful because it shows you on the outside what is happening on the inside, my friends. Do you understand that loving others is something of a gauge of how well you're loving God? Something of a gauge of how well you're loving God. And if you're loving the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, then this will be evident in how you love others. None of us will do this perfectly. We will make mistakes. We need to be eager to say we're sorry. But we should see something of a love for others, and this should mark our relationships. And if we see a lack of love for others around us, then there's probably a lack of love in our hearts, in our soul, in our mind, in our strength, isn't there? It's a gauge. Not the only gauge, but it's a gauge. It's always been this way. Even in the earliest centuries after Jesus died and was crucified and was resurrected and ascended back to heaven, in the early church, early Roman historians and philosophers, Greek philosophers and others, they would talk about how the Christians had this ridiculous notion of love. And how they would share everything because they were like brothers and sisters or something. Jesus put it into their mind, they would say. And they would say how it was crazy because they would rush in to care for people who were sick and dying when everybody else was running out or leaving them on the streets for dead. Christians would rush in. Christians were always known by their love. Jesus, in fact, said, they will know you by your what? Love, right? And what breaks my heart is that today, I don't think that most of the world would say that, would they? Now, one of the top words, if you take a poll, of what would characterize Christians today would be unloving, right? How do we get here? And maybe a more important question is, how do we get back to a place where the world would know us by our love? See, Jesus commands us to love our neighbor as ourselves. And when he is pressed by somebody else on well, who exactly is my neighbor? Like looking for a little out. Who exactly is my neighbor? Jesus makes it really clear. Everybody's your neighbor. Not everybody. Everybody, okay? Like on the other side of the world, down in Loma Bonita, they are your neighbor, okay? Even the people you don't like, or the people you're least like, they're your neighbor. Buckle up. He says, you got to love them too. Love your enemies, Jesus would say. We're called to love them. And I think it's really helpful right here to define what we mean by love, though, because we toss this word around a lot and we don't always define what we mean, right? I've read a lot of things and heard a lot of people talk about love, but it's not really love. Here's what the word is here. In both loving God, loving others, the word is agape love. There was multiple different words in the Greek language that could have been chosen right here for love. But John, the writer, Jesus, the speaker, chooses the word agape love. Agape love is a self-giving, sacrificial, unconditional love. This is a love that wants the very best for the other, not just for ourselves. This is a love that recognizes God's dignity in them, that cares so deeply for them, that seeks their best, their highest joy, and their deepest gratitude and goodness. This is what we look for. This is a love that helps them discover that. This agape love is so much richer. It's infinitely more beautiful than acceptance or affirmation or tolerance that often passes for love in our day today. You know, we've been told that we have to accept or affirm whatever other people do, and that's love. And if you don't accept, then that's unloving. But any of us know instinctively that that's not how it works, right? If you're a parent, you know that you can't just let your kid go and pursue whatever their heart desires. That would not be love, correct? And if my wife didn't call me out on things in my life, that would not be love, would it? Like sometimes love has to speak the truth in love, right? To help them know God's best for them. See, loving others is seen when we walk into a room and we don't think so much of ourselves, but of others around us and what they need and how we can be a blessing to them. Loving others is seen when we befriend somebody who's different from us. Looks different, talks different, different background, and we really want to understand them. We love others when we see somebody who has a tangible need that we could maybe help with or know somebody who could help with, and we care enough to actually help. That's what loving others looks like. Loving others means spending our time and our energy and our resources to push the gospel to the ends of the earth, even going to Loma Bonita for a week, taking a week of vacation, or to spend our money to give to those who are carrying the gospel to the hardest to reach places around the world. Loving others means we gently and humbly call others who we love out of their sin to help them into repentance and to experience the fullness of life that Jesus offers them. If loving God is where we're going to find our highest goodness and our deepest joy, then don't we want that for others? And if we want that for others, then we need to help them experience it, right? That's what love looks like. See, we love others. And when we love others, when we love God, it's going to start transforming all our relationships. It's going to transform your relationship with your kids, with your spouse. It's going to transform your relationship with your friends at school. It's going to transform those you work with. It's going to transform our community. It's going to transform our world as they see Jesus in action. This is the kind of love that Jesus calls us to. It's pretty beautiful, isn't it? There was a ship in the Vietnam War called the USS Pueblo. It was a spy ship converted to a spy ship. And in 1968, it was captured by the North Koreans. One person died, 82 survived, and they were taken into brutal imprisonment. And on one occasion, 13 of the men were forced to sit in really uncomfortable positions around this table, each in their assigned positions for hours. And after hours and hours of sitting there, the door flung open, and a North Korean guard walked in and senselessly beat the man at the first chair with the butt of his rifle. Next day, they were forced to do the same thing, everybody in their positions. And after hours of waiting, the door flung open, same thing happened. Guard comes in and beat the man, same man in that same chair, senseless. Day 3, same thing happens. That man is in his chair where he's assigned, and everybody where they're assigned, door flings open, and he's again beat with the butt of the rifle again. Day 4 comes. And all the men at the table, they know exactly what's coming. But one of the guys says, let me switch seats with you. And from then on, for weeks after weeks, they would each day take a different person and sit in that horrible chair, knowing exactly what would come to them when they did, so that that man wouldn't die from all the beatings. And after a while, they stopped because they could not beat out of them this kind of sacrificial love. Is that not a picture of Jesus? Is that not a picture of what we're called to as Christ followers? That we lay down our lives for one another. Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, John 15, verse 13, Jesus says that greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And only hours after this, Jesus would go and he would show this kind of sacrificial, self-giving, agape love by going to the cross for you and for me. And Jesus, through his friend John, he would also tell us that this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And we now get to lay down our lives for one another. Friends, if you're here and you've never surrendered your life to Jesus, if you don't know his love for you, if you would say, I've never really loved God with my heart, my soul, my mind, my strength, let today be a day that you step into an understanding of who God is, a relationship with this God who loves you so deeply and says, your best is going to come when you love me back. And if you've been following Jesus for a while, let me just plant a couple questions with you as the band comes back up. And they're going to lead us in a response to this, but let me plant a couple questions as they get in place. What would it look like for you to start loving the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength? And how is the Spirit of God challenging you, stirring in your heart to know him more today? Is there a piece of that where you say, I haven't loved God with my whole being, with all my resources, all I have at my disposal, with all my daily energies. I haven't loved God with my mind. I've been kind of slacking. How will you love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength this week? And the second is like it. Jesus says, how will you love your neighbor as yourself? Is there somebody in your life that you'd say, I need to go and I need to apologize because I have not loved them well? How will you embody the love of Jesus Christ in your relationships this week? As the band takes us into response, I want to invite you to just consider what that looks like in your life. Stay seated if you want to reflect on this. Stand to your feet to proclaim these words that we're going to build our life upon his love and extend it to others around us. If you want to come and pray with somebody, we'll have prayer partners over to the side that are here for you as well. If you're watching online, you want to know more, just simply send a text in to say, tell me more at 94000 so we can follow up with you. How is God stirring in your heart right now? Go and stand to your feet if you want to worship with us, and we're going to respond.